Some moments in life arrive quietly, slipping through the cracks of ordinary days like whispers of destiny. They don't announce themselves with trumpets or warnings. They simply happen, and suddenly everything you thought you knew about your future crumbles and rebuilds itself in a single breath. For Celeste Monroe, that moment came on a September evening when the city lights sparkled like fallen stars and she made a choice that would alter the course of her entire existence. Celeste had never been the type to take risks. At 26, she'd built a careful, predictable life. She woke at 6 each morning, arrived at Ashford Industries by 7:30, and spent her days managing the chaotic schedule of Julian Ashford, the company's enigmatic CEO. For 18 months, she'd perfected the art of being invisible, efficient, and utterly professional. She organized his meetings, filtered his calls, and kept his world running smoothly while maintaining a respectful distance. He was her boss. Nothing more. Or so she told herself every time her heart skipped when he walked past her desk. Julian Ashford was the kind of man who commanded attention without trying. Tall and lean, with dark hair that fell just slightly too long and gray eyes that seemed to see straight through people's carefully constructed facades, he moved through the corporate world with quiet confidence. At 34, he'd transformed his family's struggling manufacturing company into a tech empire, earning both admiration and envy from competitors. But despite his success, there was something lonely about him, something guarded that Celeste recognized because she saw it in herself. The Autumn Gala was an annual tradition, a networking event where investors mingled with executives over expensive wine and carefully prepared remarks. Celeste had attended before, always as the invisible assistant, taking notes and ensuring everything ran smoothly. This year felt different somehow. Or maybe she was just tired of being invisible. She'd chosen a dress the color of midnight, simple but elegant, and when Julian's eyes found her across the hotel ballroom, something shifted in the air between them. He crossed the room with purpose, 2 glasses of champagne in hand. "You look beautiful tonight," he said, offering her a glass. His voice held a warmth she'd never heard in the office. "I don't think I've ever told you that." "You're my boss," Celeste replied softly, accepting the glass. "You're not supposed to notice things like that." "Maybe that's been the problem all along." Julian's smile was gentle, almost vulnerable. "I've noticed everything about you, Celeste. I'm just terrible at showing it." The evening unfolded like a dream she was afraid to wake from. They talked between his obligatory conversations with investors, stealing moments at the edge of the ballroom where the music was softer and the world felt smaller. He asked about her childhood in Seattle, her love of old bookstores, her secret dream of writing someday. She learned that he played piano when he couldn't sleep, that he'd wanted to be an architect before family duty called him home, that loneliness was his most constant companion despite being surrounded by people every day. When the gala ended and Julian asked if she wanted to see his view of the city from his penthouse apartment nearby, Celeste knew exactly what she was agreeing to. For once in her carefully controlled life, she wanted to be reckless. She wanted to feel alive. His apartment was stunning, all floor-to-ceiling windows and minimalist elegance, but Celeste barely registered the details. The moment the door closed behind them, Julian pulled her close, his kiss tender and hungry at the same time. She melted into him, letting go of every doubt and fear. "I've wanted this for so long," he whispered against her lips. "Wanted you." They moved to his bedroom, shedding clothes and pretenses with equal abandon. Julian was patient and attentive, asking without words if she was sure, waiting for her breathless yes before continuing. When Celeste admitted this was her first time, that she'd waited for something that felt real, he slowed even further. "Then I want to make this perfect for you," he promised, kissing her forehead with unexpected tenderness. "You deserve perfect." And he kept that promise. He explored her body like a map he wanted to memorize, finding places that made her gasp and shiver. When they finally joined together, the initial discomfort gave way to pleasure so intense it brought tears to her eyes. They moved as one, finding a rhythm that felt ancient and new at the same time. Celeste called his name when waves of ecstasy crashed over her, and Julian followed moments later, burying his face in her neck. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the darkness, her head resting on his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. That's when Julian's walls came down completely. "I need to tell you something," he said quietly, his fingers tracing patterns on her shoulder. "Something I don't talk about with anyone." "You can tell me anything," Celeste whispered. "When I was 23, I was in a car accident. Bad one. Spent weeks in the hospital." His voice grew heavy with old pain. "The doctors told me I'd never be able to have children. The damage was too extensive. I'm infertile, Celeste." She lifted her head to look at him, seeing the vulnerability written across his features. "I'm so sorry, Julian. It's why I've never let anyone get close," he admitted. "Most women want families, children. I can't give them that. It seemed easier to just stay alone." Celeste cupped his face in her hands, forcing him to meet her eyes. "You're more than that diagnosis. So much more." He kissed her again, slower this time, filled with gratitude and something deeper. They made love once more before sleep claimed them, wrapped around each other like they could hold back the morning. But morning came anyway, as it always does. Julian had an early meeting, and the spell was broken. They returned to being boss and assistant, the night before becoming an unspoken memory between them. Celeste told herself it was for the best. One perfect night was more than most people got. Then, 3 weeks later, the nausea started. At first, she blamed it on stress or bad food. But when she couldn't keep breakfast down for the 5th morning in a row, when her breasts became tender and her body felt strange and unfamiliar, a cold fear began to creep through her veins. She bought the pregnancy tests on her lunch break, hands shaking as she handed cash to the pharmacy clerk. Back in her small apartment, she locked herself in the bathroom and took all 3 tests. Then she waited, pacing the tiny space, her mind racing through impossible scenarios. When she finally looked at the results, her legs gave out. She sank to the bathroom floor, staring at 3 positive tests lined up on the counter. 3 pink lines that shattered her entire world. "This can't be happening," she whispered to her empty apartment. He said it was impossible. But her body was telling a different story. The tests were telling a different story. Somehow, against all medical odds, she was carrying Julian Ashford's child. A baby that, according to doctors, should never have existed. And Celeste had absolutely no idea how to tell him. The fluorescent lights of Ashford Industries had never felt so harsh. Celeste sat at her desk, staring blankly at her computer screen while her stomach churned with a nausea that had nothing to do with morning sickness. Well, not entirely. The pregnancy symptoms were getting worse, but it was the weight of her secret that truly made her feel ill. 2 weeks had passed since those 3 positive tests had turned her world upside down. 2 weeks of hiding, lying, and watching Julian from across the office while her heart broke a little more each day. She'd made an appointment with Dr. Patricia Morgan, a highly recommended obstetrician, and the confirmation had been swift and undeniable. She was pregnant, approximately 5 weeks along, and yes, it was entirely possible even with the father's infertility diagnosis. Low sperm count doesn't mean zero, Dr. Morgan had explained gently, noting Celeste's distress. It's rare, but conception can still occur. I've seen it happen before. If he was diagnosed years ago, his condition may have improved naturally over time, or the original diagnosis might have been overly pessimistic. The medical explanation did little to ease Celeste's panic. How could she tell Julian? The man who'd trusted her with his deepest pain, who'd opened up about the infertility that had shaped his entire approach to relationships. He would never believe her. He'd think she was lying, scheming, trying to trap a wealthy man with a convenient pregnancy. "Celeste, these reports need to be on my desk in 10 minutes. She jumped at the sound of Julian's voice, looking up to find him standing beside her desk. He looked concerned, his gray eyes studying her with an intensity that made her want to confess everything. "Of course, Mr. Ashford," she managed, hating the formal distance between them. "I'll bring them right away. Are you feeling all right? You look pale." He reached out as if to touch her forehead, then seemed to think better of it, his hand dropping back to his side. "I'm fine, just a little tired," Celeste lied, the words tasting bitter on her tongue. How many lies had she told him now? She'd lost count. Julian lingered for a moment longer, clearly wanting to say something more, but a call from his office phone interrupted them. He walked away, and Celeste released a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Her phone buzzed with a text from Nina Rodriguez, her best friend since college. "Lunch today? You've been avoiding me and I'm worried." Celeste couldn't avoid everyone forever. She texted back an agreement to meet at their usual cafe, then returned to work, trying to ignore the wave of nausea rising in her throat. Lunch with Nina was supposed to be a reprieve, but her friend took one look at Celeste and knew something was terribly wrong. "You're pregnant," Nina said flatly, setting down her coffee. As a nurse, she'd developed an uncanny ability to diagnose problems at a glance. "Please tell me I'm wrong." Celeste's eyes filled with tears, and that was answer enough. Nina reached across the table, gripping her hand tightly. "It's his, isn't it? Julian's? He told me he was infertile," Celeste whispered, glancing around to make sure no one was listening. "He was so certain, Nina. How do I tell him I'm carrying a baby he thinks is impossible?" "You tell him the truth. Today. Right now." Nina's voice was firm but kind. "Every day you wait makes this worse. He deserves to know, and you deserve support. You can't carry this alone. He'll think I'm lying. He'll think I planned this somehow, that I'm after his money." "Then he's not the man you believe he is," Nina countered. "But I don't think that's who Julian Ashford is. From what you've told me, he's a good man. Give him a chance to prove it." Celeste wanted to believe her friend, but fear had wrapped itself around her heart like chains. She'd seen enough news stories about wealthy men being targeted by false pregnancy claims. Why would Julian believe her story when it defied medical reality? That afternoon, she tried to work up the courage to talk to him. She rehearsed the words in her head a dozen different ways. "Julian, I need to tell you something important. Mr. Ashford, we need to discuss a personal matter. I'm pregnant, and I know you won't believe me, but the baby is yours." None of them sounded right. They all sounded like the opening lines of a disaster. Around 3 o'clock, Julian emerged from his office, his expression troubled. "Celeste, can you come in here please? I need to talk to you." Her heart hammered as she followed him into the spacious corner office, closing the door behind her. This was it. This was her moment. She would tell him everything and face whatever consequences came. But Julian spoke first, his voice strained with frustration. "What's going on with you? And please don't say nothing, because we both know that's not true." "I don't know what you mean," Celeste hedged, unable to meet his eyes. "You've been avoiding me for weeks. Ever since that night we—" He ran a hand through his hair in agitation. "Was it that bad? Did I do something wrong? Because I thought we had something real, Celeste. I thought maybe we could explore what this is between us." The pain in his voice nearly broke her. "You didn't do anything wrong. That night was perfect. Then why do you look at me like you're afraid? Why do you run every time I try to talk to you?" Julian moved closer, his presence overwhelming her senses. "I've been going crazy trying to figure out what happened. One moment we're closer than I've ever been with anyone, and the next you're treating me like a stranger." "It's complicated," Celeste whispered, her resolve crumbling. "Then uncomplicate it. Talk to me." His hand reached for hers, his touch gentle. "Please, Celeste. I'm falling in love with you, and I don't know how to make you see that." The words should have filled her with joy. Instead, they felt like a knife twisting in her chest. He loved her. And she was about to destroy everything. "Julian, I need to tell you something, and I need you to listen without interrupting." Her voice shook, but she forced herself to continue. "That night we spent together, it changed everything. Not just emotionally, but physically. Something happened that neither of us expected." His brow furrowed in confusion. "What do you mean?" Before she could answer, his assistant's voice came through the intercom. "Mr. Ashford, your father is on line 1. He says it's urgent regarding the board meeting." Julian cursed under his breath. "I have to take this. It'll just be a minute." He squeezed her hand apologetically before moving to his desk to pick up the phone. But 1 minute turned into 5, then 10, as the call grew heated. Celeste listened to Julian argue with his father about company strategy, about his father's attempts to control his decisions, about respect and boundaries. When he finally hung up, he looked exhausted. "I'm sorry about that. My father has impeccable timing." He turned back to her, but his phone rang again immediately. Then his computer chimed with urgent emails. The moment had passed, swallowed by the demands of his position. "We'll talk later," Julian promised, but Celeste could see his attention was already divided. "Can you stay late tonight? After everyone else leaves?" She nodded, knowing she couldn't put this off any longer. Tonight, she would tell him everything. The rest of the afternoon crawled by. Celeste's stomach was in knots, the nausea intensifying with her anxiety. She kept saltine crackers in her desk drawer now, nibbling them throughout the day to keep the sickness at bay. By 6 o'clock, the office had mostly emptied. Julian called her into his office again, and this time there were no interruptions waiting in the wings. He gestured for her to sit on the leather sofa by the window rather than the formal chairs facing his desk. "Now, tell me what's going on," he said, sitting beside her. "No more deflecting." Celeste took a deep breath, her hands trembling in her lap. This was it. The moment of truth that would change everything. "Do you remember what you told me that night? About the accident, about being infertile?" "Of course I remember." His expression grew wary. "Why?" "Because sometimes medical diagnoses aren't absolute. Sometimes what doctors think is impossible actually isn't." She forced herself to look at him, to see his reaction. "Julian, I'm pregnant." The words hung in the air between them like a bomb waiting to detonate. She watched his face transform from confusion to shock to something harder, darker. "Pregnant," he repeated slowly, as if testing the word. "How far along?" "About 5 weeks." She saw him doing the math, counting back to that night they'd shared. His jaw tightened, his whole body going rigid. "That's convenient timing," he said, his voice cold in a way she'd never heard before. "Right after we sleep together. Julian, please listen. Who's the father, Celeste?" The question was sharp, cutting. "You are," she said desperately. "I know you don't believe it's possible, but..." "You're right. I don't believe it's possible." He stood abruptly, putting distance between them. "I've been tested multiple times. 3 different doctors confirmed the same diagnosis. I cannot have children." "But you can," Celeste insisted, rising to face him. "Low fertility isn't the same as no fertility. Dr. Morgan explained it to me. It's rare, but it happens. The baby is yours, Julian. You're the only man I've ever been with." His laugh was bitter and hollow. "Do you really expect me to believe that? That you, conveniently a virgin, slept with me once and got pregnant when medical science says it's impossible?" "It's the truth," she pleaded, tears streaming down her face now. "Why would I lie about this?" "Money." The word was cold and final. "You're not the first woman to try this with a wealthy man, Celeste. I just thought you were different. I thought you actually cared about me. I do care about you. I love you, she sobbed. This baby is yours, and I can prove it. We can do DNA tests, we can. Get out. Julian's voice was quiet but absolute. I want you out of my office, and first thing Monday morning, I want your resignation on my desk. You're firing me? I'm giving you the option to resign with dignity, he corrected. Consider it a kindness, which is more than you deserve right now. The words shattered something fundamental inside Celeste. She'd known he might not believe her, but she hadn't been prepared for this level of rejection, this complete dismissal of everything they'd shared. Fine, she whispered, her voice broken. I'll resign. But that doesn't change the truth. This baby is yours, Julian, whether you believe it or not. And one day, you're going to realize what you threw away. She walked out of his office with her head held high, refusing to let him see her completely fall apart. But once she reached her desk, once she gathered her purse and her few personal belongings, the tears came in earnest. She left Ashford Industries that evening knowing she would never return, carrying a secret that had just destroyed the only man she'd ever loved. Outside, the city lights blurred through her tears. Nina was waiting by her car, having somehow sensed that Celeste would need her. She took one look at her friend's devastated face and pulled her into a tight embrace. He didn't believe you, Nina said softly. It wasn't a question. He thinks I'm lying. That I'm trying to trap him. Celeste's voice broke. He asked for my resignation, Nina. I've lost everything. My job, the man I love, any chance at happiness. You haven't lost everything, Nina said firmly, placing a protective hand on Celeste's still flat stomach. You have this baby. And you have me. We'll figure this out together. But as Nina drove her home through the darkening streets, Celeste couldn't shake the image of Julian's face, twisted with betrayal and anger. She'd thought the hardest part would be telling him the truth. She'd never imagined the hardest part would be living with his complete rejection of it. That night, alone in her apartment, Celeste placed both hands on her belly and made a quiet promise to the tiny life growing inside her. I'll protect you, she whispered. Even if your father doesn't want us, I'll make sure you know you're loved. I'll make sure you know you're not a mistake, even if you were unexpected. The impossible had become possible. A child conceived against all odds. But sometimes miracles came wrapped in heartbreak, and Celeste was learning that truth the hardest way possible. The days following that devastating confrontation felt like moving through water. Everything was slower, heavier, harder. Celeste had submitted her resignation via email, effective immediately, and spent the weekend in her apartment with Nina, trying to figure out how to rebuild a life that had just imploded. You need to eat something, Nina said on Sunday evening, placing a bowl of soup in front of her. The baby needs nutrition, even if you don't feel like it. Celeste forced down a few spoonfuls, her mind replaying Julian's words on an endless loop. The way he'd looked at her, like she was a stranger. A liar. A schemer after his money. It hurt more than she'd thought possible. Have you thought about what you're going to do? Nina asked gently. About work, about the baby? I'll find another job somehow. And I'll raise this baby alone. Celeste's voice was hollow. I won't beg Julian to believe me. I won't chase after someone who thinks so little of me. That's pride talking, Nina observed. And pride doesn't pay the bills or raise a child. It's not pride. It's self-respect. Celeste set down her spoon. He made his choice. Now I have to make mine. But making choices became infinitely harder when Celeste woke Monday morning to find the nausea had intensified dramatically. She barely made it to the bathroom before vomiting violently, her body rejecting everything she'd eaten the night before. The morning's sickness had evolved into all-day sickness, and it was becoming harder to hide, harder to function. She'd applied to several administrative positions that week, carefully omitting her most recent employment from her resume. How could she explain why she'd left Ashford Industries after only 18 months without a reference? But the job market was competitive, and without Julian's recommendation, her prospects looked bleak. By Wednesday, Celeste had to face another harsh reality. Her savings would last maybe 2 months if she was careful. After that, she'd need to dip into the small inheritance her grandmother had left her, money she'd been saving for emergencies. She supposed an unexpected pregnancy and unemployment qualified. Nina had offered to let Celeste move in with her, but Celeste wasn't ready to accept that level of charity yet. She still had some independence left, some dignity. She clung to it fiercely. Then, exactly 2 weeks after she'd walked out of Ashford Industries, Julian called her. Celeste stared at her phone, watching his name flash on the screen, her heart hammering. She almost didn't answer. What could he possibly have to say to her now? But curiosity and a desperate, foolish hope made her press accept. Hello? Her voice came out steadier than she felt. Celeste. Just her name, spoken in that deep voice she'd fallen in love with. He sounded tired. Can we meet? Please. I need to talk to you. I don't think that's a good idea. Please, he repeated, and there was something in his tone that made her pause. There's a coffee shop on 3rd Street, the one with the blue awning. Can you meet me there in an hour? Against her better judgment, against every self-protective instinct screaming at her to refuse, Celeste agreed. She dressed carefully, choosing loose clothing that hid her slightly changing shape, though at 6 weeks pregnant, the changes were minimal. Still, she felt different. She felt like every part of her life was written across her face for anyone to read. Julian was already there when she arrived, sitting at a corner table away from the windows. He looked terrible, she realized with a start. Dark circles under his eyes, his usual polished appearance slightly disheveled. When he saw her, he stood immediately, his expression a mixture of relief and uncertainty. Thank you for coming, he said quietly. I wasn't sure you would. I almost didn't. Celeste sat across from him, keeping the table between them like a barrier. What do you want, Julian? He signaled the waitress, ordering them both coffee before seeming to remember. Actually, can she have tea instead? Herbal, decaffeinated. He looked at Celeste. I read that pregnant women shouldn't have too much caffeine. The small gesture made her throat tight. You've been reading about pregnancy? I've been reading about a lot of things, Julian admitted, running a hand through his hair. Celeste, I made a terrible mistake. I said horrible things to you, accused you of things I had no right to accuse you of. I'm sorry. Sorry doesn't undo the damage, she said, though her heart was beating faster. You threw me away like I was nothing. Like everything we shared meant nothing. I know. And I was wrong. He leaned forward, his gray eyes intense. After you left, after I'd had time to calm down, I started thinking. Really thinking. About that night, about you, about everything you'd ever shown me about who you are. And nothing about your character suggested you'd lie about something like this. But you didn't believe me when it mattered. No, I didn't. Because I was scared. The admission seemed to cost him. For years, I've used my infertility as a shield, a reason to keep people at arm's length. Then you came along and broke through every defense I had. That night with you was the first time I'd ever felt truly connected to another person. And then when you said you were pregnant, it felt like the universe was playing a cruel joke. Like I was being punished for daring to want something real. The waitress brought their drinks, and Julian waited until she'd left before continuing. I went back to see Dr. Harrison, the specialist who diagnosed me 10 years ago. I told him about your pregnancy, about your doctor's explanation that low fertility wasn't the same as zero fertility. Julian pulled out a manila folder from his bag. He ran new tests. Comprehensive ones. Celeste's hands trembled as she reached for her tea. And he confirmed what your Dr. Morgan told you. My sperm count is low, significantly low, but not zero. Apparently, there's been some natural improvement over the years, and the original diagnosis was overly pessimistic. Dr. Harrison said conception would be difficult but not impossible, especially with the right circumstances. Julian's voice dropped. He called it a miracle, actually. Said the odds of natural conception in my case were less than 5%, but not zero. Celeste felt tears prickling her eyes. So you believe me now? Now that a doctor told you it was possible? I should have believed you from the beginning, Julian said, his voice thick with emotion. I should have trusted you, trusted what we had together. Instead, I let my fear and years of medical certainty make me cruel. I hurt you when you needed me most, and I will regret that for the rest of my life. You really hurt me, Julian. The tears were falling now. I felt so alone, so terrified, and you made me feel like I was lying about something sacred. About our baby. I know. And I don't expect you to forgive me right away. I don't deserve that. He reached across the table, not quite touching her hand but close enough that she could feel the warmth of his skin. But I'm asking for a chance to make this right. To be there for you and for our child. To prove that I'm better than the coward who sent you away. How do I know you won't push me away again when things get hard? Celeste asked, voicing her deepest fear. How do I know you won't decide this is too complicated, too messy, too much? You don't, Julian admitted honestly. I can't promise I'll be perfect or that I won't make mistakes. But I can promise I'll never stop trying. I can promise that I want this, want you, want our baby, more than I've ever wanted anything. Celeste studied his face, searching for any hint of doubt or reservation. All she saw was sincerity and a vulnerability that matched her own. I don't need grand gestures, she said quietly. I don't need your money or your name or any of that. I just need you to be present. To be honest. To be a partner in this, not just when it's convenient. I want to be all of that, Julian said firmly. I want to be at every doctor's appointment. I want to help you with the pregnancy symptoms and the preparations. I want to be there when our daughter or son is born. I want to be a father, Celeste. I never thought I'd have that chance, and now that I do, I'm not going to waste it. What about your family? Your father? Celeste had met Robert Ashford once, briefly, and found him cold and controlling. He's not going to be happy about this. My father doesn't get a vote in my personal life, Julian said, steel in his voice. I've spent too many years letting him dictate my choices. This is my life, our life, and we'll build it however we want. Celeste wanted to believe him. She wanted to let go of the hurt and embrace the possibility of them as a family. But trust, once broken, wasn't easily repaired. I need time, she said finally. I can't just forget what happened, how you made me feel. We need to rebuild this slowly. Take all the time you need, Julian agreed. Just let me be there. Let me prove I mean what I'm saying. They talked for another hour, tentatively planning next steps. Julian insisted on reinstating her salary as a parental support payment, refusing to let her argue that she didn't need his money. He gave her the name of the best obstetrician in the city and offered to accompany her to her next appointment. Slowly, carefully, they began sketching the outline of what their future might look like. When they finally left the coffee shop, Julian walked Celeste to her car. Before she could open the door, he placed a gentle hand on her arm. Can I? He gestured toward her stomach, his expression hopeful and nervous at once. Celeste hesitated, then nodded. Julian placed his palm flat against her still small belly, his eyes closing as if he were trying to feel the life growing there. Hi, little one, he whispered. I'm your dad. I'm sorry I didn't believe in you at first, but I promise I believe now. And I promise I'm going to do everything I can to be the father you deserve. Watching him, Celeste felt something inside her soften and crack. This was the man she'd fallen in love with, the one who'd been vulnerable and real with her. He was flawed and he'd made terrible mistakes, but he was also trying. He was showing up. "We have a long way to go," she reminded him, her hand covering his against her stomach. "I know," Julian said, looking up at her with those gray eyes that had haunted her dreams. "But I'm not going anywhere. Not this time." As Celeste drove home that evening, one hand resting protectively on her belly, she allowed herself to feel a glimmer of hope. The road ahead would be complicated, filled with difficult conversations and the hard work of rebuilding trust. But maybe, just maybe, the impossible could lead to something beautiful. Maybe miracles came in many forms, wrapped in second chances and the courage to try again. The baby growing inside her was proof that impossible didn't always mean never. And perhaps, with time and effort, she and Julian could become proof that broken things could be mended into something even stronger than before.